In today's video, we're going to talk about the phases of matter. So matter is anything that has mass and volume. And matter can exist in different phases or different forms. These forms are probably familiar with you. You've heard them before, but you might not understand what's going on with the little atoms inside the matter at these different stages. So you have this sheet today, and I'd like you to fill it in while I'm filling it in. And then you can put it in your binder, and it's a wonderful reference note sheet. So the boxes in the middle represent the phases of matter, and the arrows are going to represent what we call it when we change from one phase to the next. So starting at the bottom, this box is going to represent solids. This box is going to represent liquids. And this box is representing gas. All matter is made of tiny particles called atoms, and the atoms are always moving. Solids, liquids, and gases, the particles are going to move differently and they're arranged differently. If we look at solids and we zoomed in onto a solid, we would see that all the atoms are nicely organized in rows. They have a definite structure. These atoms in a solid are moving. They're kind of vibrating back and forth. Because the atoms are arranged like this, they're in straight rows and they're organized and they're just vibrating a little bit. This is why solids have shape, and they also have volume. They don't change shape. They're always the shape that they're in. And they take up a certain amount of room. When I add energy to a solid in the form of heat, eventually my particles are going to start vibrating faster, and when they vibrate faster, they hit each other and spread out a little bit more. So when we go from solid to a liquid, our particles are a little more spread out. They're not in those nice, neat rows, and they're moving faster. So I'm going to draw little arrows on here that tell myself these ones are moving even faster. In a liquid, liquids have no shape. If I put a liquid in a cup, it will take the shape of the cup. If I put a liquid in a balloon, it will take the shape of a balloon. So I can say that liquids have no shape, but liquids do have volume. They take up a certain amount of space. If I add even more energy to a liquid, my particles are going to move even faster. They're going to hit each other and spread out even more. And when those particles do that, they move faster, they spread out even more. Liquids change into a gas. My longer arrows tell me that these things are moving faster. Gases have no shape and their volume changes. forgot to write one thing in, so I'm going to go back and do that right now. When we go from a solid to a liquid to a gas, we are going to add energy. So I'm just going to write a little arrow here, and I'm going to say add energy. Energy is the form of heat. So solid to a liquid, we add heat energy. Liquid, we add heat energy and we get a gas. So if you need to pause here to write some of that in, this would be a good place in the video to pause. When we come back, we're going to talk about what we call it when we go from a solid to a liquid or a solid to a gas. What are all those certain changes called? When we change between states, there is certain names for the change occurring. You are familiar with some of them, and some of them might be new to you. So if you go from a solid to a liquid, like if you go from an ice cube to liquid water, that is called melting. And that should be one that you are familiar with. When you go from a liquid or solid to a liquid, that is called melting. The opposite of melting, going from a liquid back to a solid, your water back to ice, is called freezing. And you should also be very familiar with freezing. The next two, some of you might still be familiar with, and when I say them, you're going to be like, oh yeah, I remember that now. Liquid to a gas, this would be like when it rains and there's puddles, and then the next day you go out and the puddles are gone. It's not that that water disappeared into nowhere, it's that it went from a liquid into a gas. It went from liquid water into water vapor in the atmosphere. And we call that change evaporation. When the water vapor is up in the air and it turns from a gas back into a liquid, we call that condensation. Condensation occurs when you take a shower. So you have that hot water vapor that comes up out of the shower, and it's going to get all on the mirror. And sometimes after you take a shower, your mirror will look all steamy and foggy and there'll be water running down it. That's because the water vapor in the air condensated back into liquid water on your mirror. The last two changes are probably very new to pretty much everyone in this room because it just doesn't occur that often in nature. You don't see it, not like melting or evaporation. It doesn't happen very often. But it's when we actually jump the liquid phase, so we go right from a solid to a gas or right from a gas back down to a solid. When you go from a solid right into a gas, this is called sublimation. If you have ever seen a video about dry ice, and I'm going to post a video about dry ice on the Haiku page for you to check out. But dry ice, it's solid carbon dioxide, and it goes right from a solid into a gas, and it causes this kind of eerie gas foam, cloudy looking stuff when it sublimates. So kind of Halloween time, if you see that kind of white smoke floating around, oftentimes that's dry ice sublimating. So check out that video of dry ice on the Haiku page so you can see what dry ice does when it sublimates. The last one is when we have gas and it goes back into a solid. This is called deposition. My example of this is since we live in Wisconsin, we have very cold winters. Sometimes when you get in the car in the morning, the car is very, very cold. The windows of the car are very, very cold. But your breath, when you breathe out, you can see it. So it's gaseous and you can see the kind of when you breathe out. Sometimes when you're in that cold car and you're breathing, the gas from the water vapor in your breath will actually turn quickly into a solid, and that's when you get that frosty stuff on the mirrors that you have to scrape off. So if you ride a school bus, this always used to happen to me in the school bus in the morning when it was cold. You wouldn't be able to see out the windows because they'd be covered in that thick, solid frost, and you'd have to scrape it off so you could see outside. That's your water vapor in your breath in gas form depositing into a solid on the windows. So you have this paper. It's going to go in your binder, and it's a great thing to use to study what the phases of matter are and what we call it when we jump between them. So this goes in your binder. The rest of class today, you're going to be watching a video about the phases of matter.